Good afternoon and most welcome to 1360 of the Heidegger series. We will today talk about becoming, a philosophy of becoming. I would say that is something that doesn't really exist. Becoming in the quantum creation sense is a new thing to Western culture. And it's to be compared to fixatedness or lockdown of the all theory, where the honest search for knowledge has led to limitations, unforeseen, unknown limitations. The authors of the book are Vaibhav Tripathi and Pallavi Bharadwaj. There will be a link to the article in the description of the video. I will start to read the abstract and then I will make a summary. Sorry about my voice today. I didn't get a good night's sleep, but I still feel fit for this particular subject. Neuroscience of the yogic theory of mind and consciousness by Vaibhav Tripathi and Pallavi Bharadwaj. First one being at Boston University, the second at MIT. Well, couldn't be better. Yoga as a practice and philosophy of life has been followed for more than 4,500 years, with known evidence of yogic practices in the Indus Valley civilization. A plethora of scholars have contributed to the development of the field, but in last century the profound knowledge remained inaccessible and incomprehensible to the general public. Last few decades have seen a resurgence in the utility of yoga and meditation as a practice with growing scientific evidence behind it. Significant scientific literature has been published illustrating the benefits of yogic practices including asana, pranayama, and dhyana, on mental and physical well-being. Electrophysiological and recent functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI. Studies have found explicit neural signatures for yogic practices. In this article, we present a review of the philosophy of yoga. Based on the dualistic Samkhya school as applied to consciousness, summarized by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. Followed by discussion on the 5 riddhi, modulations of mind. Practice of pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, different states of samadhi and samapatti. We introduce yogic theory of mind and consciousness, YTMC, a cohesive theory that can model both external modulations and internal states of the mind. YTMC allows us to model the external states, internal states of meditation, samadhi, and even the disorders of consciousness. Further, we list some testable neuroscientific hypotheses that could be answered using YTMC, analyze the benefits, outcomes, and possible limitations. Introduction. The quest to understand consciousness has been an old one. Questions about our existence. Who am I? What is the world? Where am I? Has baffled philosophers for centuries. A plethora of philosophical systems were developed in India to answer these questions, which eventually condensed into 6 orthodox schools. And at least 4 unorthodox schools. Samkhya school dealt with the nature of reality, broken down in its constituent parts. Yoga emerged as a more practical philosophy to realize the true reality, and has been practiced since the Indus Valley civilization. The philosophy matured for a few thousand years when the rules and principles were compiled into the brief sutras by Patanjali. Consciousness as a field of study gained momentum in the Western world when Descartes described the mind-body problem and stated the popular statement, I think, therefore I am. The development of electroencephalogram, EEG, and other medical devices made it possible to record people when they apparently lost consciousness, either during sleep or alter their states during anesthesia or during meditation. The recent development of neuroimaging and stimulation modalities like fMRI, TMS, and TDCS increased the quest to understand. Our different states of consciousness, and many theories have developed to allow for better experiments, including integrated transformation theory, and recent ones like attention schema, AST, and dendritic integration theory. Though the current theories offer many explanations for the different day-to-day experiences, the approach is convergent to what some philosophers, though the current theories offer many explanations for the different day-to-day experiences. It does not integrate well with the internal states as experienced during meditation, samadhi, or even sleep. We present a new theory called the yogic theory of mind and consciousness, YTMC. Which is based on Samkhya and yoga philosophy. Instead of taking the materialistic emergent approach to mind, consciousness, and intelligence, Samkhya takes a holistic approach to the description of the world. Samkhya postulates that the reality is composed of consciousness, Purusha, also called seer, soul, Brahman, etc., and nature, Prakriti. The approach is convergent to what some philosophers have begun to hypothesize, that consciousness could be a fundamental property, and it is hard to understand it. YTMC proposes that mind and seer are separate entities. The mind is emergent in nature, and it depends upon the number and type of sensory data streams an organism can receive, sense organs, and the number of ways it can act, action organs. Tanmatras, or the sensitivity and sensory specificity of sense organs, separates the individuals within species and across species to have a different percept of the world. Consciousness of an organism includes the role of the sense organ, action organs, mind along with intellect, ego, and memory systems, which represent the internal faculties. And the seer, which is the seat of awareness. Why TMC can be generically applied to different animals, as recent studies have demonstrated that a wide variety of animals, including corvids, display consciousness. Tanmatras, or the sensitivity and sensory specificity of sense organs, separates the individuals within species and across species to have a different percept of the world. Consciousness of an organism includes the role of the sense organs, action organs, mind, along with intellect, ego, and memory systems, which represent the internal faculties. And the seer, which is the seat of awareness. Why TMC can be generically applied to different animals, as recent studies have demonstrated that a wide majority of animals, including corvids, display consciousness. YTMC includes the concept of modulations of mind like sleep, memory, mind wandering, perception and inference from the Yoga Sutras, which suggests that the mind is aligned with the seer unless the mind is one of these modulations. Meditation and finer states like samadhi can occur when the mind reigns in the modulations and become aware of the seer. Being established in the seer consciousness has been the goal for self-realization according to the yogic texts. In this paper, we first introduce the organization of consciousness utilizing the Samkhya Yoga philosophies in our YTMC model. Followed by a discussion on the modulations of mind and how activity and connectivity of systems of the YTMC model could result in these modulations. We then describe various internal states as experienced during yoga and the finer states of samadhi, with explanation of how they can be modeled using YTMC, and propose some experiments to test such states. We discuss how YTMC can explain various disorders of consciousness, we end by listing some predictions we can make using the YTMC model and the description of modulations, internal states and finer states. YTMC is one of the first theories of consciousness that integrate both internal and external states and can provide testable predictions and experiments to establish these results. Organization of consciousness and YTMC. According to Samkhya philosophy, the world is composed of consciousness, the seer, Purusha, and creation, Prakriti. Which itself is the total of 24 tattvas, including the sense organs, tanmatras, action organs, elements, mind, intellect, and ego, along with memory. In our yogic theory of mind and consciousness, YTMC, we extend this philosophy into a model as illustrated in Figure 1. Which represent the various faculties of each individual. The sense organs brings in data and knowledge about the world, filtered through the tanmatras or sensitivity, sensory specificity of each sense organ. Not shown separately. But built into the abstraction of the sense organs. the way we have thought of sense organs are not just the physical organs of sense, but also includes the regions in the brain which are specific to the processing of each sense. For example, the eyes, retinal ganglion cells, lateral geniculate nucleus, excuse me, then on to the early and late visual cortex are all abstracted as the visual sense organ. The mind composes and interacts with these senses and make decisions based on the intellect subsystem along with memory and ego subsystem. And then sends the output signal to the motor organs, which are an abstraction including the motor cortex. And I think you remember the motor cortex. We studied it 50 lectures ago, that all what we do is involving the motor cortex, even if it's just thinking of walking, talking, eating, and so forth. End of comment. Parts of the cerebellum and the peripheral nervous system as compared to Samkhya model described in box 2, which refers to the 24 tattvas related to external sense perceptions in humans. We have also included the internal sense organs in the YTMC model. And our abstraction can be generalized over different species of animals. Not just humans. Though we have not shown subcortical regions in the representations on figure 1, they are assumed to be a part of the sense organs. we look closely at each individual system in the sections below. Sense organs. We perceive the external world through the five senses of touch, taste, sight, smell, and sound. And the internal world through nociception, proprioception, balance, and interoception. The sense organs as abstracted in the YTMC model are not just the sensory receptors, but composed of the whole hierarchical processing involved, including the receptors, ganglion cells, peripheral nervous system, to the thalamus and the brain. For the visual sense, higher areas like the V4, V8, medial temporal, intraparietal sulcus, IPS, are also included. Similarly, for the auditory sense, ears, cochlea, thalamus, up to the auditory cortex are all abstracted in the model. Tanmatras. The concept of Tanmatras is unique to Samkhya. And represents the subtle dimension of the senses. The idea of Tanmatras have been unexplored in consciousness sciences, and in our model we consider Tanmatras as composed of two aspects: specificity and sensitivity of a sense organ. Sensitivity refers to the range of sensory data to which the sense organ can respond. For example, humans have a hearing frequency of 20 Hz to 20 kHz, Dogs have a sensitive olfactory sense with up to 40 times more receptors than humans. Specificity determines the amount of sense data required to trigger a conscious perception of that sense. The sensitivity and specificity which determine the corresponding tanmatras can change across species and even within individuals of the same species. Excuse me. Specificity of sense organs would depend on modulations, including attention, inference, mind wandering, and sleep. Attention has shown to modulate perception via amplification of signals specific to a sensory type, time, and location. Action organs. The organs of action includes the limbs, speech, organs of excretion and procreation, and also all the muscular movements that can be done consciously. From the motor cortex to the peripheral nervous system, the regions responsible for motion or movement are a part of the organs of action. Though we have not shown the cerebellum, but it is an important part of the process of action, even though the absence of it has not shown much difference in cognitive abilities, but only slightly impaired motor functions. internal faculties. Mind. The mind is a subsystem of the internal faculties. Along with intellect, ego, and memory system, it works in close conjunction to create a continuity of perception, aids in planning, cognition, sensory integration, and intention to move. Mind is the higher order region which can deploy attention through the dorsal attention network down to amplify signals from the sensory systems to gain more knowledge of the world. Or it can go into mind wandering, imagination, thinking about the past and future. Mind is the central system when we expect someone to be conscious. A lot of published studies interpret consciousness as the mind. But yogic texts separate out the mind from other faculties. The mind assumes the form of its contents, and when engaged with the outside world, it forgets the awareness of the seer. I would say the mind, my comment here, is very close to the Cartesian mind as a reflection of the outside, with a stress on passivity. End of comment. Desires arise in the mind along with a myriad of thoughts, intuition, and creativity. It is affected by the modulations and lose track of the seer in the process. And I think that's very important. It's affected by the modulations and it loses tracks of the seer in the process. This is very close to das Man, being occupied by one's daily doings. Yoga Sutras point out that the time spent in modulations by the mind prevents it from completely experiencing the reality in the present moment. Now, all the practices and teachings of the yoga philosophy is aimed at reducing these modulations of the mind and removing the seeds of impressions in the memory which cause the mind to go into these modulations again and again. Through consistent practice of the 8 limbs of yoga, the modulations of the mind gets more and more restrained, which results in better concentration, increase in joy, and the feeling of oneness with the world. The mind is best represented as composed of the default network, posterior cingulate cortex, temporoparietal junction, and temporopolar cortex, and the attention network, parietal cortex, frontal eye fields. A lot of studies assign the seat of consciousness as the posterior parietal cortex. But we argue that instead it is the seat of the mind. The research paradigm that are targeted to the study of the seer actually study the mind. According to YTMC, the development of mind is closely linked to the number and type of sense organs, their associated tanmatras, and the number and type of action organs. Organisms with different sense organs, actions, organs, and tanmatras will have a different or unique internal faculties. The mind of a dog, which has a different tanmatra for olfactory sensations, would have different mind processes that humans or even dolphins, which could sense bands of electromagnetic waves that we cannot. The mind is unique to every organism, and we should not expect direct correlations in the neural processing and signatures across species until we fix the three sense organs, action organs, and tanmatras. We should expect to see conserved principles across species, but any cross-species analysis should not be widely extrapolated. The development of mind across species can be an important step in understanding the limits of conscious processing. I think if I can put in a pause, I will rearrange the way. I would say this theory is pretty unique. I was looking for similar research hypothesis 3-4 years ago, and I never found one, so this is a new invention. And the authors of the article are renowned, one coming from the most honorable institution, MIT, and the other one from Boston University. And what they are addressing is the before perception. Remember, in physics, there is no world before the collapse of the superposition. There is no time, nor is there any space in the famed Wheeler-DeWitt equation. And if we take Sir Roger Penrose, no world before perception, it comes into being simultaneously, and all ordinary explanations when it comes to neurology and many other sciences like biology and chemistry, they use after the collapse things that are secondary, derived, and random. I here call them atoms, but we earlier used explanations like reductive units. It could be moleculars, could be the cell. In genetics we often find the gene, and everything gets reduced to that. The problem with reductionism is not that it is vile or it is absurd. The problem it is using the after the collapse. It's a tad late, and therefore a problem will always evolve because we are not reaching into the stuff that makes up reality. And this is why it always leads to a fixatedness, a lockdown. We saw that in an earlier lecture when we spoke about Delbrück and Muller-Bohr, how the very search for knowledge, the willingness to want more, to understand more, will lead one even more into the valley of fixatedness and lockdown. There is no way out of that. And what the authors of this article is hypothesizing is to look at a before perception. Well, you can call it ontology, but it's a bit misleading because all ontology is after the fact. They are made up of experiences where there is a perceiver and something perceived. And this then builds up the system. No matter if it's an atom, a DNA, biology, it could be the cells, and then you work yourself upwards. We have in the series already looked at the different problems that evolve from that, how it ends almost always in a paradox, and you have this narrowing of understanding all of a sudden. And especially the penultimate lecture, I understood even more how the search for knowing more, the sensible, honest want to understand, will lead you further away from what is actually there. It is fascinating, this step they taken. It's a little bit like a Heideggerian neurology, going to the things themselves and not assuming the already constructed material that we assume, as we know, culturally dependent things, concepts, categories, and they are bound to leave us into the darkness of not knowing. It is coming into action in the really experience. It's not there before, but it will be there afterwards. This is going to the things themselves. And maybe there's a question.
So these two authors looking for arche-perception, so to say, like in Plato's cave, that you are in the darkness and then you slowly see a little bit light. Is that kind of perception?
Yeah, we can call it arche, but it's
Arche-perception.
we could call it arche-perception. And things, they are coming into being at the very same time. So there's not the perception of things in the act of the arche-perception, if you want. Things and perception comes simultaneously. Think about the tennis game of Sir Roger Penrose. There is no game there before. It's coming in the act of seeing, observing. Just like in quantum mechanics, there is no matter to see. There is no space and time. And we know from quantum mechanics, this is the makeup of the world. This is the origins. So it holds true. Another.
So we could say then, yes, hello. So in one way, Plato was right, because you are like in a dark cave, and then you slowly begin to see. Okay, the difference is that in quantum physics, and as these two authors postulate, is that you create the world with your observation. That is the difference. For Plato, everything is already out there, so
Yes.
there is the big difference. Plato is a little bit right, but still completely wrong at the same time. Okay, so now I would like to ask you so far, perhaps it's too easy as a question, a lazy question. What is the most important phrase so far in this article that catches what they want to convey? This Tripathi and Bharadwaj and Bharadwaj. Try to find out a way to remember these three, like a threefold in Greek.
The most important that struck me in this readout is, of course, they are very careful. It's in the article as a whole. They are very careful to not confuse what they call seer with mind. The mind is a fixatedness. A mind is something that sees things. It's an perception, if you like. This is what we mean by perception. That's a mind. There is no mind in quantum mechanics, at least how they define mind. And Descartes equals mind, and he finds mind, but with the externality, what's out there. His mind reflects the outside world, and thinking in itself is parts of the external world. Yes, shadows, but still it is shadows of either original true material objects, or, if you prefer, original Platonic ideas. And you see here how you can go in two different directions. The one is, of course, the empiricist, going to matter, reduce everything to that. And the other way is going into idealism, that thinking alone exists, and it's not, how can you say, interacts with nothing. The Wheeler Dewitt points to an interaction. They call it an event. The authors call it seer. It's very similar. Seer you can find on page 8 in the article. I just saw that now. Any more questions, Kalle?
No, I was thinking about the India way of putting, what you call them, Hans, this Vajna here, and thus you have, so to say, three eyes, and I was thinking about, I like bad puns, but I think sometimes bad puns are good to remember things, because check out the name of the author, Tripathi. So three, it makes me think about the number 3. Path, so path is like 3 paths, like three eyes that we have. And do you think something else with number 3 to remember? So we have it is how many different ways?
Well, you can actually make a triangle here, what we call archeperception. I don't know if a triangle is debate. The archeperception, we need a better name there, of course, but it's good today, will lead to perception. And things. Now we see, now we are, in the reductive sense, also made of the things.
So let's say the person in the cave, if you use that analogy, slowly when you have more light, it's like this and this, so they are simultaneously. You have both the perceptions.
Simultaneously, exactly, very good. It's simultaneously. It's absolutely instantaneously. And we could not know this before quantum mechanics. Why? Because it's instantaneous. It is absolutely instantaneous. Actually, it doesn't even take time. So with your permission, I can continue. Another odd thing, I wasn't too sure of where the theory was into. I got enthused. But when I read about yoga theory, it strikes me I am drinking, for the first time in my life, a yogi tea. What are the chances for that? I had no idea it was named yogi tea. It was absolutely delicious, and I looked at the label. Didn't know it existed even. I will go into the different subparts, but as a little nota bene here, do not assume these descriptions are completely equal to the Western descriptions. That assumes that there, so to speak, already is a world out there. To use Thomas Nagel's name, a world at large. And I begin, and this is page 8. Intellect. The intellect subsystem is a part of the internal faculties and is related with decision making. Mastering thoughts that come up in the mind, and is represented by cognitive control network. I would say that is very close to David Bader's cerebellum, the little brain. Memory. Memory subsystem centered in the hippocampus and amygdala is associated with memory formation. But there are evidences of the wide-scale cortical involvement in long-term memories. A ton of work have been done in this field with regards to the actual dynamics of memory formation, extinction, and affect-based memories, spatial memories, etc. In our model, memory holds the information for any event. It is also related to one of the modulations of the mind, when the connectivity between the mind, the default network, and the memory region is high. The mind spends a lot of time thinking about the past. Ego. Ego subsystem is associated with self-referential processing, risk-taking, and centered around the medial prefrontal cortex. Many studies put it as a part of the default network, but it is closely linked with the mind, intellect, and memory. Damages to this region has shown reduced risk aversion. We further hypothesized that increased connectivity between the ego and default subsystems could be linked to narcissistic personality traits. Sia. Seer is the most fine aspect of consciousness and represents the seat of awareness. It perceives the world through the mind, which is affected by modulations. Yogic texts relate to it as the source of conscious awareness, joy and happiness. Self-realization or kaivalya is found when the practitioner becomes totally aware of the seer through the reduction of memories and modulations. Indian philosophers consider realization of the seer as one of the most important goals of life. We are of the thought that current neuroscientific research has looked into the aspects of the mind and the modulations of the mind, but has not clearly investigated the neural correlates of the seer. Research into meditation techniques, especially where modulations do not exist in the mind, can show a better understanding of the seer. We discuss in a section below where the seer is a fundamental property or an emergent quality. Modulations of mind. I take the liberty to put a comment already in the title. It is very close to attitude we heard earlier from E. McGilchrist or Stimmung. A different attitude makes a different world. The purpose of yoga as a practice is to silence the modulations, vrittis, of the mind so that the mind can be established in the seer. These modulations can be either painful or not. When the modulations are active, the mind is engaged with the scenery, sense organs, or knowledge related to sense organs. Another comment here we have earlier went into the region of trying to see objects, or the staring gaze of the left hemisphere. Yoga Sutras propose the presence of 5 modulations. Proof or means of knowledge, pramana. Wrong understanding of knowledge, virparya. Imagination, vikalpa, and sleep, nidra. And last, memory, smrti. Pramana or means of knowledge can be of 3 types as accepted in the Samkhya and philosophical schools: perception, inference, and documented evidence. Pratyaksha, which is perception, means gaining knowledge through the sense organs directly. Anumana, which is inference, means making an inference on the information captured through the 5 sense organs. And shabd means utilizing the evidence documented by an authentic source. An example cited in many Indian philosophical texts to describe the tree. Consider being in a forest and you see smoke. You infer that there should be a fire nearby, anumana or inference. As you go nearer, you visually confirm the presence of fire. This is praitaksha perception. you know from knowledge gained from experience or from documented evidence showed that covering the fire up can extinguish it by cutting the oxygen source. The means of knowledge takes the mind away from the seer and thus engaged in the scenery. The other modulations, viparaya, is wrong knowledge, not based on the true form of an object. Example, you cross the street and a few people start laughing, and you think to yourself, if they were laughing on you. Vikalpa, or imagination, follows from a word and knowledge of the word, but devoid of any object. Memory, smrti, or remembering the past, reliving the experiences from the past, or thinking about events from the past which are non-existent now, is also considered a modulation of the mind along with sleep, nidra, where the mind has no content. Sleep as modulation. Sleep has been understood to be a state of consciousness where there are no contents of the mind. Yet sleep research have depicted that it is a very active process. From waste clearance by the flow of cerebrospinal fluid, sleep spindles, to memory consolidation via neural slow waves. Both the processes were found to be related. Papers have proposed that local sleep can occur during wakefulness and may be responsible for attentional lapses. The Yoga Sutras classify sleep as a modulation of the mind which not only occurs once or twice during the day-night for an extended period of time, but also small, short bursts or local periods of sleep. We argue that sleep is not a different state of consciousness, but a modulation of the mind. It is a physical process required by the body to carry out maintenance activities, but expert meditators and yogis have been suggested to reduce the need for sleep through years of practice. The research is lacking in this domain, as only recently scientists have started to piece together the importance of sleep in our lives. But how yogic practice can reduce the need of sleep needs to be studied carefully. We also propose that local sleep and extended sleep during nighttime would have similar characteristics in terms of neural patterns, especially in the mind subsystem. Attention as modulation. Attention has been researched extensively since the last few decades. Attention has been shown to alter perception by amplifying the signals at the focus of attention and attenuating other signals. Yoga Sutras consider attention as a means of gaining information and knowledge about the world, in which in turn alters our perception of the world. Attention is thought of as a modulation of the mind, as it takes the mind away from the seer, which is the source of awareness, to the scenery. This is very close to being in the world, being in the action, being caught up. Attention modulates the content of the mind. Yoga texts have described the role of attention in practices like dharana dhyana and suggest that intense attention to any of the sensory streams reduce all other modulations of the mind, and the mind becomes alert and focused. Awareness and attention is often confused. We believe that attention is a process of the mind regulated with the dorsal attention network, DAN. And required dedicated resources from the brain and engages effort so much that people prefer pain over attending for long durations or harder tasks. Whereas awareness is a property of the consciousness in general, and seer in particular, we are always aware, and only during the times of modulations our awareness reduces. Awareness can also be thought of as salience, and may have possible correlates in the ventral attention or salience network. I would make a summary, could possibly put just a short pause there. These are things, especially in neurology, we covered before. The lack of attention is often called, or an attention that is unregulated. This is coming from David Barder, who looked closely into dysfunctional or less working cerebellum cases. Ian McGilchrist points out in his The Matter with Things and The Master and His Emissary that ADHD, OCD and similar deficits in attention are new things to us, and they are becoming more and more common. It seems that this is the engagement with the scenery, not being present, but being with the Seyendes, or the beings. Lisa Feldman-Bartet also points to the prevalence of not being able to regulate one's emotions. Emotions are not part of Samkhya. They are typically Western, especially in this sense of hardwired reactions, or an idea that emotions are hardwired animistic reactions. Lisa Feldman-Bartet points to that emotions can be changed, and they are essential for our survival, and that we regulate them. So she parallels very much David Barder, showing how we learn how to regulate the internal emotions. They can be seen as small plans. I don't think it's very hard at this instant to get the understanding. If you believe in a fixed outside world at large, you will already be caught up, and you will lose your control, which is so clearly testified is a new thing, and it's a disastrous thing. not only in these more severe cases, but lack of attention is becoming progressive among students, pupils, all over the Western Hemisphere. And it's a disaster, to say the least. This shows that attention is something you can master. It's very close to Lisa and David Barder, showing that the seer system, if I call it that, with the cerebellum and the frontal cortex and the motor cortex, are participating, and it's a constant training. And having fixed things, being with the beings, it's like not working properly. Because we know at the end of this scale we have schizophrenia. This is the sharpened, starry gaze, looks for objects, sees them as not coming from the situation, and actually not requiring attention. They are caught up in all disturbances. Disturbances that are subjective, not shared by others. And I would go so far to say, not even understandable for the person himself or herself. We live in a fragmented, schizophrenic world where everything is out there, and therefore our attention becomes fragmented. It becomes small, small pieces. And our thinking becomes, as Heidegger says, unthankful. It's no longer danken, it is denken. It's a chore. Why? Well, we have to modulate within our heads the existences, the concepts, the categories, all defined. And we haven't listened to the evidence. On the idealist side, if you think about concepts, categories, percepts, we got a disaster with the Gödelian understanding in the 20s. On the material side, we had something similar, but on the side of the external, quantum mechanics. Both are, so to speak, paradoxes, and they are both on each side, one of the mental sphere, one of the more, as a Westerner would say, material sphere. But they come together, and they can only be understood in a togetherness. Otherwise, there can be no understanding. This is my take from attention, and I really like that Ian McGilchrist calls the left hemisphere a specific attitude, a posture that has moral significance as well. Sorry.
Excuse me. Hello. I'm very apologize for being so. Lisa and Barrett. And so we should, in 2020, published a book. We have not gone through her. We have never gone through her books, I suppose. So we should return to her, since what you say about the importance of the senses. They are essential for survival. We should go through her perhaps. And yes, the word observation that we use in quantum physics, so it's so huge as a term, and she can help us. And for instead of speaking about observation, which is so difficult term, we have now a new term for today's year. Okay, and then also that what she says about that sense being necessary for survival. And that was my banal commentary.
No, not banal. That's good. Yeah, I'd be happy to take up Lisa Feldman-Barrett again. She was a very likable character, and it's almost, I like the term, it's a moral stance, because once you start to reduce everything, you will put art, morality, ethics, all the aesthetic, all understanding into smithereens. And I tried to point out in the penultimate lecture when we spoke about that excellent article by Leah Ciccarelli, how the search, the want for knowledge, it's nothing wrong with it, but it's as long as we don't know that it's coming at the very same time, we will make the problems larger and larger. And my personal emotional reaction now is possibly it's not enough with Gödel and quantum mechanics, but together they make a rather strong cure for this problem, because it brings understanding from what we as Westerners perceive to be two different sides. And we need to be addressed how we think. Could be something that our friend sorry, the name got lost here now.
What the prayer, Michael Chris now?
No, the Indian philosopher. It sure will come back to me. We had contact with him when we last went in.
Ashish Dalila.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. Ashish Dalila. He addresses directly from a standpoint of Samkhya. And I have the hunch now that that won't do for us. We need to start in the territory that we feel is established, the one of dualism. And then, slowly, we go to the deepening of understanding. Maybe we can use this triangle and see that we start at the bottom and we get closer to the archeperception, which is both matter and attention as the same, at the same time, simultaneously. The seer, if you like. I think I should end there. I say thank you very much for sharing in this new adventure, and have a very pleasant afternoon. Bye bye for now.